Hey guys, back with a new video. This time, my top 5 most hyped games. And now I'm kind of stealing this a bit from, I think Pete Dorr did a video kind of similar to this, where I'm basically talking about games that I was the most hyped for. Like, the hype was insane for me. Now, these aren't games that, like, in the press or, those kind of games are just super hyped up in general. So it's not like Grand Theft Auto 4 or something like that. Halo 2, I remember was incredibly hyped up. It's not those types of games. Just my games that personally I was incredibly hyped for. It's going to be different from like Pete Fedora's video, and I like to hear what people like have for games that they're really that they were super hyped up for. So I decided to just go with 5, and actually, when I was thinking up the list, I could actually only think of about 5. I tend not to get too hyped up for games. I become interested in a lot of them, and for like games in 2015 and 2016, there's quite a few I'm looking forward to. But actual hype is rare for me. But there are a few instances where it was pretty insane, and I thought I'd like to talk about these games. And let's start right at the bottom of the list with number 5, and that is Fable. Now, this game is a game. This is a notorious game for not living up to the hype. Peter Molyneux was, championing this game like crazy back in the day for the original Xbox. And I remember, it was hard not to believe him. He did Black and White, which I think was a pretty big success. But he promised this game to be everything. This was going to be the next big RPG. You could do anything. You could make any kind of choice you wanted. It was supposed to have an insane amount of freedom. It was supposed to be a really deep RPG, and that was attractive. I think for a lot of people, myself included. A memory I have is like we had like a trampoline. I remember like me and my brother were like on the trampoline. I remember just telling him like the whole time, the Fable is gonna be the greatest game ever. I was pretty young when Fable came out. I was around 14, I think. I think it came out in 2004. So I was so hyped for this game. I was telling him that this game is gonna have everything. It's gonna be the best game ever. I was so hyped for this shit because the hype was insane and the promise was there. Like it turns out, Peter Molyneux, he's known to like I think he's hyped up every game he's done, and they've never lived up to the hype. Fable included. Now, is Fable a bad game? Some people think it is. I think a lot of people think the series is pretty terrible. I like Fable 1 and 2. Fable 3 is okay. But the first Fable, I think, is actually the best in the series. It has its positives. It has a great amount of charm to it. The humor, I think, is, for the most part, good. There's some fart jokes and things like that, which I don't find very funny. I did back when the game came out, but as an RPG, it's pretty solid too. The combat's fun. I remember the story wasn't anything special. One of my favorite parts of the games, though, of this game was those doors. Like there were doors with faces on them. I forget what you called them, but you'd get like secret, hidden, like legendary weapons, and I think even armor if you unlocked these doors. And you had to. There was like a secret behind them. Like they would give you like a riddle or whatever. And there were certain ways to open each of these doors throughout the world. I loved that. I thought that was really cool. And the world itself was really well developed, well realized. It just, there wasn't that much choice to the game. It was very short. It just didn't live up to the hype. It was a good game that just, unfortunately, like with all of Peter Molyneux's games, it didn't live up to the hype. That said, I was incredibly hyped for it. I ate up all the hype. I got suckered in, unfortunately. And I learned my lesson for Fable 2, which in some ways was a better game, in some ways was worse. But that game, I had better expectations, so I didn't outright hate that game. But yeah, I know that series is kind of a love it or hate it series. I generally like the series, but the first game is my favorite. I was definitely really hyped for it. All right, at number 4, and these are ordered like from 5 to 1 in terms of like least hype to most hype of these games. Number 4 is Ninja Gaiden for the original Xbox. Now, this was kind of a surprise. Now, I remember the demo of this. Like, I got it with an Xbox official magazine. And until that demo came out, I wasn't really looking forward to it. I mean, I played the NES ones, at least Ninja Gaiden 1 and 2 as a kid. I enjoyed them. But this was I remember it did get a lot of hype through like the gaming press, the official Xbox magazine that I used to get. we talked about this game quite highly in previews. So I was actually excited to find out that a demo did come out on one of these demo discs. I think like a month or two before release, and I played this demo, and it blew me away. It blew me the fuck away. This game was awesome. The only other game similar to it that I'd played beforehand, I want to say Devil May Cry, the original. I think I did play it, and I enjoyed it. And that was a whole new type of game, like that character action game. That was like Devil May Cry was pretty much like the start of that genre, which is interesting. But to me, Ninja Gaiden was like that took that Devil May Cry template and just made everything more extreme. I'll talk about that. That may be for another time. I guess I'll talk more about like the hype. But anyways, this demo that I played, it blew me away. You only got to play the first mission, including the boss. But I must have played this demo probably 100 times. And one of my good friends, he played it like over 100 times as well. We were both obsessed with this demo. We'd play it from start to finish, constantly trying to get like the best. I think there was like a score or something. But it was so much fun. And when the game came out, it got great reviews, but it was known for having like a high level of challenge. It was one of those games like Dark Souls where everybody was just going, "This is like one of the hardest games ever. It's so difficult." It's like the NES games, and maybe it's because I played the demo so much, but I actually didn't find the game all that difficult. Well, okay, it's a challenging game, but I didn't find it like unbeatable or anything. And one of the bosses that people had like a really hard time with, Alma, I actually beat her like the first try going through the game. In fact, I found like the two bosses towards the end of the game and some others a lot harder than her. But it was, yeah, when I finally got the game, like, I mean, the hype was insane just because of this demo. And then, of course, after the demo, I started to read all these previews, and then the reviews started coming out, and I had to get that game day one. And I blazed through that game in probably less than a couple days. And it was awesome. And I still love the game to this day. I think it's still my favorite character action game. It's very interesting, too, because it's actually non-linear in a way. The first few missions are pretty linear, but then you reach the city, and it's almost got like a Metroidvania type feel, where the game is still divided into chapters, but the city kind of interconnects with all these different areas on the outside of the city, and you'll find yourself like in chapter 7 or so in the city. And then later you'll be like in a sewer system, and then it will like connect back with the city, and there's like outskirts. It was really awesome. You could like unlock the original Ninja Gaiden games. I remember it was very difficult to do that. I remember when I did that. I went through on most of the difficulty levels. I couldn't ever beat Master Ninja mode. That's insane. Like now people complain say that the game's really difficult. Now Master Ninja mode, that's where the Ninja Gaiden games are very difficult. But yeah, I had a blast. It still remains one of my favorite games. The music was really good in it too. The combat was just really fast, really fun, really bloody. I loved all the combos. The weapons were fun to use. I loved upgrading them. There was an exploration focus to the game. I loved finding all like the health items and upgrades and things like that. The camera was probably the only thing I remember not liking too much. It's one of those games I really want to go back to. I've only played like Ninja Gaiden Black and the original version. I want to play like Sigma on the PS3. Although I think it's like censored or something. I'll have to look more into that. But it's a game I haven't played in years. But it lived up to the hype for me, actually. The hype was insane with that game, and it lived up to it. The second game, I think a lot of people were disappointed with that one. I actually really liked the second game too. The hype wasn't as insane with that game for me for some reason. It was only really the first game. The second game was a lot more linear. That game felt actually cheap at times, whereas like the first game I thought was challenging but fair. The second game delved into cheap territory a few times, and then Ninja Gaiden 3 I haven't even played because that game looks like absolute shit. So yeah, Ninja Gaiden, my fourth most hyped game. At number 3 is Dark Souls 2. Not a big surprise, and I'm not gonna talk about this game too much. I've talked about this game many times in the past. Dark Souls is my favorite game of all time. And as soon as they announced Dark Souls 2 at, I think it was like a Spike Video Games Award or some shit like that, a weird place to announce that game. Yeah, my hype from that point was just through the roof. When you have your favorite game of all time and then they announce a sequel to it, I think you're going to be generally pretty hyped. I've talked about Dark Souls 2 a lot. Did it live up to the hype? For a lot of people, I guess not. For me, it certainly did. I've said before I do prefer it over Demon Souls and even actually Bloodborne, which I think a lot of people would call me crazy for that. But yeah, it lived up to the hype. Like I said before, I think in my Dark Souls 2 review, I played that game for 15 hours straight when I got that game. I've never done that with any other game ever, and it's pretty, it's crazy. The hype for that game is insane. I was just reading so many previews. I really don't want to spoil myself on games that I'm hyped up for, but it's so hard. And with Dark Souls 2, it was just too difficult. And it was the same thing with Bloodborne. Dark Souls 3 was actually leaked, not too long ago. I want to do like a video on leaks or something because it's kind of annoying. I would have liked that to be a nice surprise. I think some people actually might be maybe a little burnt out on the Souls games now. Not me. I'll take as many as I possibly can get, as long as the quality's there and and the craftsmanship is there. But yeah, Dark Souls 2, my third most hyped game. At number 2 is Diablo 3. This game, the hype was pretty insane. Now, Diablo 1 and 2 are huge parts of my childhood. I didn't do much PC gaming back when I was a kid, but Diablo 1 and 2 I played to death. I remember Diablo 1, like my dad got it from like someone at work. He had like a burnt disc of it, so it wasn't even like an official copy. And I think that was like one of the first like really violent games I had played. I remember like there was like naked corpses all over that game. The Butcher actually like gave me nightmares at that age because I was 6 or 7 when I played Diablo 1, and it was a lot of like some of it was kind of hard to understand. It was a pretty hardcore dungeon crawler RPG. But I never did end up finishing it. My brother actually was able to, but I got as far as like the caverns, and that was it. I never even reached hell. But with Diablo 1, I think the big thing with that game was that I want to say that was probably the first online game I ever played, and that blew my mind. As a 7-year-old, that you could play with strangers across the world online with them in co-op with BattleNet, and we had dial-up, and Diablo 1 and 2, you could actually play those games on dial-up, which was pretty awesome. So Diablo 2, I played that. I think this was I played it when like the expansion was out. So I didn't play it on release because I when I was young I didn't keep track of game releases all that well. And Diablo 2 got like amazing reviews, and that's a huge game for a lot of people. Now Diablo 2, I'd say that was probably my first video game obsession. I would play that hours on end every day, like all day, and I was oddly obsessive with that game. My brother bought it, unfortunately, and we only had one computer, so we had to like take turns playing the game. And for some strange reason, I didn't want him to get farther than me, so I would like hide the game so he couldn't play it. And I look back at that, I want to just punch myself. I was such a douchebag. But yeah, we were both obsessed with it. The online was amazing. Like that game was just like better than Diablo 1 in pretty much every way. It was very dark and brutal. Like the loot was just so addictive too. I got like a sorceress to like the highest level. I made a lot of friends playing that game. It was just an obsession. I just loved that game to death. So the wait between Diablo 2 and 3 was just excruciatingly long. And for the longest time, I don't think anybody thought we'd get a Diablo 3. So when they finally announced it, I was just like, holy shit. Now, there was maybe some lack of excitement because a lot of the original Diablo 2 team was gone from Blizzard at that point. And I think they went on to make stuff like Hellgate London and like Torchlight and Torchlight 2. So I had some reservations, but the hype was very strong. I remember going in day one, buying that game. I even bought like a Diablo 3 mouse pad, like a new headset, and like it was just crazy. I was so hyped for that game. I like me and my brother and like a couple of his friends. We like went to some place and we like just played for like all night, like all day. I think it was like this massive long session, and I enjoyed it. However, like the first time through the game, I really enjoyed it. It's once you start looking at the end game stuff, and now I'm talking about the original Diablo 3 PC release. The end game was really bad. Diablo 1 and 2 had, well, maybe not Diablo 1 so much, but Diablo 2 had an amazing endgame where you would just do like bail runs and things like that. And there was just always more loot for you to get. the level cap was really big, and it took forever to get to that point. You're focusing on all these different characters, and they were constantly updating it with new patches, so it was great. Diablo 3, like, there was like no end game, and you had like the loot system was kind of broken too because they had the real money auction house at that point, and the only good loot was loot you could get from the auction house. Very powerful loot was very like it was basically impossible to get unless you bought it, and like the stats like capped off on weapons like damage output and things like that like capped off really quickly, and it made like the Inferno difficulty insanely impossible. Like I remember getting to Act 2 on Inferno, and it was impossible. Some people were able to do it, but it wasn't fun. So after, I had beaten the game a couple times, I was kind of done with it. And that's when the disappointment, I think, started to set in, when I realized, like, things like the real money auction house really broke the balance of that game. And just a lot of the design decisions, like the skill system, I thought was a huge step back from Diablo 2, and still, in my opinion, kind of is. But yeah, that's my disappointment started to set in, and then I realized, wow, that it didn't quite live up to the hype. And even though I actually did play it for a good like 300 hours when it first came out, I was just, I don't know, maybe I got suckered into the hype a bit, and I was kind of, like I said, I was still enjoying it. Like I think that original release, the game was still pretty good, but nowhere near as good as Diablo 2 or even Diablo 1. Now they've actually, like, this is amazing to me. Blizzard has actually really improved Diablo 3, and now I'd say Diablo 3 is actually an excellent game. I still don't think it's quite up to the level of Diablo 2, but it's way better than it used to be. Of course, the auction house is gone now. The loot is so much better. This new expansion that came out is great. The Paragon level system is awesome. Like, they've really improved the endgame content of Diablo 3 in some amazing ways. And I think the lead designer on Diablo 3 was Jay Wilson, and I guess he got a lot of the blame for a lot of like the terrible design decisions with Diablo 3, and he's gone now. But with patches and updates in this new expansion, they've made Diablo 3, I think, the game it was supposed to be from the beginning, which is great. It's just that initial release, I think, was pretty disappointment. That said, the hype for Diablo 3 was absolutely insane, and that's why it's at number 2. All right, at number 1 is a surprise title. I don't think a lot of people would expect this. Megaman Powered Up for the PSP. Well, maybe not a huge surprise. I'm a massive Mega Man fan. It was a huge part of my childhood growing up. In fact, it was my favorite series growing up until like the N64, when Zelda started to come in. Because yeah, I really didn't like get obsessed with the Zelda series until like Ocarina of Time. But I've been a lifelong Mega Man fan. Mainly the classic series and the X series, although I like the Legends games as well. Now, Mega Man Powered Up, the hype for this game is weird, because I don't think too many people were excited for it. It's actually, was it why, I forget if it was announced before the PSP came out. If it was, I think it's why I bought a PSP. I'm probably wrong on that, though. It doesn't seem like it would have been something announced before the PSP came out. But this was easily my most hyped game for the PSP. And the thing with this game, it has like this chibi art style, which I actually, when this game came out, I was fairly young when it came. Well, I guess not really. I was starting to get into high school, I guess. But the art style I wasn't actually too fond of, and still to this day I'm not crazy about it. The one aspect of this game that made me more excited for this game than any other game was the level editor. Now, Mega Man Maverick Hunter X came out before this, which was a remake of Mega Man X. I really enjoyed that, but this was the one I was super hyped up for just because of that level editor. When I was a kid playing these Mega Man games, I was so obsessed with them where I would make my own levels, not in a program or anything like that, but I'd draw them on like pieces of paper. I come up with my own Robot Masters and things like that. I had an interest in like actual platformer level design when I was a kid, like starting when I was very young, and that's kind of persisted all throughout my life. And this was finally my chance to make my own Mega Man levels. And before this game came out, I was messing around with with ROMs. I wasn't hacking the ROMs myself, but there were like these programs where you could like make your own levels using the ROMs with like Mega Man 2 and 3 on the NES, and I would mess with that kind of thing. And I did this for other games too. Like there was a game called Knit Stories for PC that allowed you to make your own levels, and I really messed with that a lot. I really liked level editors back when I was younger. I find nowadays I'm not as into them. Like Little Big Planet, if that game came out when I was like really young, like 14, 15, I think I would have been more excited for it. But as I've gotten older, I'm less interested in that kind of thing. But back when Mega Man Powered Up was about to come out, I was like I had to have this game for that level editor alone. And the hype was so insane with this game where I was counting down the days until release with an actual calendar. I had this calendar and I had every day written off. I'd cross out each day as it came closer to release. I've never done that with any other game. And when it came out, I played it nonstop, mostly focused on the level editor. The game itself was really good. It was forgot to mention this. It was a remake of the first Mega Man game, and it was a pretty good one. There were a lot of different characters to control. You could play as all the different robot masters. It still had a good level of challenge. There was like a chibi art style, but you could also use like the classic style. But you had to actually play as Chibi Mega Man, which that was kind of strange. But that level editor, I was obsessed with it. I used that level editor and made so many different levels. I played it for like weeks straight. Unfortunately, I did eventually get bored with it. The level editor itself was actually pretty good, but after like a week or so, I started to realize how limited it really was. It actually didn't allow you to create like an insane amount of levels, and you had to use like the templates they gave you for like the level backgrounds and things like that. And even though I really enjoyed making these levels, what I really wanted was like an all-encompassing level editor where you could like choose level backgrounds and enemies from like Mega Man 2 and 3 and 4 and things like that. And they actually were going to make a Mega Man Powered Up 2 based like a remake of Mega Man 2, but this game actually sold like shit. No one bought it. I was probably one of the few people that bought it. So that fell through, which was unfortunate. I was probably going to be super hyped up for Mega Man Powered Up 2 as well. But yeah, this is one of those games that I don't think many people are hyped up for. It's one of those things where it appealed to me in a lot of ways because, as a Mega Man fan, I was looking forward to it in general. And then you had that level editor, which, again, back then I was obsessed with making levels and things like that, like level design. So yeah, that was easily my most hyped up game. I have never actually had a calendar and counted down the days to release and looked up previews and reviews and everything, and it was just crazy. Uh, and I don't think that's going to happen again, unfortunately. Maybe, I never say never, but I don't think a game's going to come along that reaches that hype level to me. Again, because I think as you get older, your hype levels for games and things in general actually starts to die down. But when you're around 14, 15, I think that's when it's at its most extreme. So I can definitely see why that was such a hyped up game for me. But yeah, that's it, guys. What are some of your most hyped up games? What games were you just dying for? I'd really like to know. And that's it. I want to thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.